It is my pleasure to introduce our first keynote, and I'm actually going to do a dual introduction. First, would like to introduce the colleague of our keynote. He doesn't know I'm going to do this. But I'd like to first introduce the twosome here from Complete College America, Stan Jones and Tom Sugar. First, Tom Sugar. Tom serves as Senior Vice President for Complete College America. And Tom served as Senior Director for Senator Evan Bayh for many years, and currently, as I mentioned, is Senior Vice President for Complete College America. And in his role, he oversees the federal policy work for Complete College America, as well as communications, and is the liaison for Georgia, and so has given us tremendous advice and counsel. And I want to especially thank him for all his work with us. And so I'd like him to stand and accept our appreciation. Thank you, Tom. And Stan Jones is president of Complete College America. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Stan for longer than either of us care to admit. His bio is in your packet, and I'm not going to go through all of that with you, but would like to share a couple of things that are not on there. Included on there, you will see that he was elected to the Indiana General Assembly at the age of 24. Now, I don't remember that because I was an infant then. But he served with distinction in the Indiana General Assembly and was the architect of many pieces of legislation that really propelled Indiana forward and served as a base for a lot of the work that still is legendary in Indiana. He served for 12 years as Commissioner of Higher Education in Indiana and created the Indiana Roundtable, which was and still is the force of community coming together around P16, P20 educational issues. He created the 21st Century Scholars Program, which serves the needs of low-income students moving into college and literally was a model for states across the country. He was the chief architect of the community college system in Indiana, and just really was an inspiration to all of us that served under his leadership. He started Complete College America in 2009, and the sole focus of Complete College America is completion of college. And the fact that in that short period it has created such a sea change along with other partners in the country says really volumes about Stan's leadership. So please join me in welcoming Stan Jones once again to the state of Georgia.
Thank you, and it's certainly a pleasure to be here. And clearly we're very impressed with this great turnout and the focus that you have on college completion. The group of students you had up here before was truly impressive, and I think symbolic of a bigger trend that's going on across the country, and I think kind of unreported. As we've been in this time of economic distress, I think that one of the unwritten stories is what's going on. We talk about people not buying houses, not buying cars. We look at the sales figures every month. But the one thing that people are buying in overwhelming numbers is a college education. And we've had record enrollment ever since this recession started. So much so that we now have more people going to college in this country than we ever have. And they are more diverse than they ever have. We have more women than men. We have more African Americans. We have more Latinos. We have more first-generation students than we ever had in this country's history. And so we have won this huge battle about providing access to millions of people across this country. And we should applaud that success. And these students that were up here today certainly represent that. You could see the diversity, you could see the first generation students, you could see the students that have gone through challenges. And I think it's important that in this time of economic distress, that people who have not very much money or worried about losing a job have essentially said they're going to take what little money they have, the time they have away from their family, and place this bet on a college education. And that's a pretty big vote of confidence. And at the same time, it makes us responsible so that there are many more students that are as exceptional and successful as the ones you had up here today. And that's really the challenge you have before you. Because if we look at the fall class, the record enrollment and diversity, if we fast forward to that graduating class in the spring, about half of those students aren't there if they went to a four-year college. 2/3 of them aren't there if they went to a two-year college. And the diversity that we're so proud of and excited about in the fall class is very much gone by the time we get to that spring class. And so that, too, is our challenge, to have many more people be successful. You're about putting together completion plans. We're thrilled with the governor's leadership and involvement on this. And it's a huge task and an important one. And so I want to cover 4 areas very briefly that I hope you think about. There's a book called Eat This, Not That. I want to talk a little bit about Do This, Not That, as kind of a way to share with you what we've learned across the country. The first is remediation, and you can't escape that. At most community colleges, 60% of students start in remedial courses. At many of the open access institutions, 40% start. There was a Virginia study recently done by over 5,000 students. The Community College Research Center did it and essentially said remediation is a huge failure. There have been other studies done in California and Florida. The data that we've collected across the country from 30 states shows that there's a system failure in remediation. So much so that this study says, this study says that what happens is that 30% of the students don't show to the first math course they're assigned to in a remedial course. They didn't come to go into remedial work, they didn't like math, and they get assigned a remedial math course, they don't come. Some of the ones that pass don't go to the next one. And in fact, it's so unsuccessful that if Lynn and I were both assigned to take remedial courses and Lynn decided to skip them, she would actually do better than me, who actually took the remedial sequence. Now, why is that? It's not necessarily because learning's not going on in a remedial class. It's because of attrition. It's the 30% we lose right away with a big R on their chest saying they don't want to go home and say, I'm in remedial education. It's that they pass one but don't come back for the next. It's because we have these policies that say you need to take your remediation right away, but once you've completed that, you don't have to take your math class until you graduate. So the remediation you were preparing for, you can put off. This is led across the country, and this is not unique. It's state after state after state. So, for example, Texas starts 40,000 students in remedial math in community colleges every year. 3 years later, only 6,000, or 14%, have completed a college-level math class. Achieving the Dream, which is a nationwide effort of community colleges, they say that 72% of students who start in remedial math don't even attempt a gateway math course within 3 years. Don't even attempt. So this is a huge failure. Then we have students that are also placed 3 levels down, essentially fractions and decimals. Those students have a 1% chance of ever getting a degree or certificate of any kind. You know, clearly this is not working. And it's not working because of this attrition. And so so that's the don't do that. And the do this is there's emerging strategies across the country. If you think about remediation differently, rather than as a prerequisite, a serial in front of a course, you think about it as a co-requisite, providing support to the college-level courses, putting students in those college-level courses. And so the estimates are from 1/3 to 1/2 of students that fail placement tests could benefit by putting in college-level classes with support. The support may be as simple as having the class 5 days a week rather than 3 days a week. In Texas, they add 2 hours of tutoring required for every 1 hour of class time. In Tennessee, there's required computer lab time for every hour that they have in class. University of Maryland, the flagship, College Park, they do 5 weeks of remediation at the beginning of the semester. They test the students again. 90% of the ones that failed, 90% passed the second time, they'd all failed the first time. They go on and take a 10-week regular college math course in algebra or statistics or math reasoning and are as successful as those that didn't need remediation. And so this is the emerging consensus across the country that we need to put students in college work as soon as we can. Now, maybe for the ones that can't do the 1/3 or the 2/3, the 1/2 or the third, maybe they need a stretch course. The content spread over 2 semesters. Highly much more effective than what we're doing today. And for that third group, the third level, they need certificate programs, skill certificate programs with embedded remediation like nurse's aid, welding, dental assistants, where they can earn a skill certificate, embed the remediation, and move on if they choose to. So this is all quite possible. Now, people have said to me, well, Stan, they may fail if you put them in these college level classes. And I say, yes, they may, but they surely are failing the way we're doing it today. So do not do what we're doing today. There should not be remedial classes that stand alone. They should be in conjunction with and simultaneous to, kind of just in time, supporting college level classes. I talked about system failure. I think this is so important. We only have 1/4 of the students in this country going to a traditional 4-year college, living on campus as residential students going full-time. And yet that's how we've designed the system over the last several hundred years. The students we have today are not those kinds of students. They didn't come out of strong high schools. They didn't have a strong college prep background. 70% of them work. Huge numbers commute. 40% of them are part-time students. They are not those students, but that's the system we have for those students. I think we have system failure. I don't think it's a question of leadership. I don't think it's a question, you can see the students, it's not their desire that's lacking. I think we have great faculty. The system is designed poorly. So 3 key points. One is we talk about time, and these are all counterintuitive, not the way we think about things. Sometimes we say people need more time. I know my grandmother always referred to me as a late bloomer, even when I was in my 40s, which I didn't appreciate. But we typically think more time. Well, the federal government came out this year for the first time tracking bachelor degrees, 4-year, 6-year, and 8-year rates, graduation rates. The 6-year graduation rate is about 55%. The 8-year graduation rate is 58%. So those additional 2 years, we bought 3 more percent. You might be at year 6 living the dream, but you're not achieving the dream. And you're as likely to drop out at year 6 as you are to complete. And so it's even more true at 2-year colleges, where it takes, on the average, full-time students to get 4 years to get a 2-year degree, 3 years to get a 1-year certificate. And what happens, we say life gets in the way. People get married, they get divorced, they change jobs, they change cities, and each one of those life experiences causes them to pull away. And stop-outs are dropouts. So we need to deal with time as the length of time it takes. Very important. Secondly, when you start is a time consideration. If you start right out of high school, you have about a 50% chance of getting a 4-year college degree. If you wait 1 year, that drops in half. If you wait till you're 24, it drops in half again. And so programs that get students right out of high school into college, that have dual credit programs, advanced placement programs, the students that leave school, high school, a couple $100, decide that's all they need, show up 4 years later, they're in big trouble because they didn't start right away, and we need to shorten that timeline. And lastly, but importantly on time, is the issue of intensity. We know that students that, kind of the de facto full-time student now is 12 hours. Well, 12 hours means 5 years. And we have to have students taking 15 and 16 hours and to do it in a successful way. And there's strategies to do that. We know the full-time students also graduate at 4 or 5 times higher rates than part-time students. Part-time graduation rates 15% at four-year colleges, at two-year colleges. There are ways to convert them into full-time students for many of them. Hawaii has an initiative which I love. It's called 15 to Finish, encouraging students to take 15 credit hours from the beginning in each semester. They're trying to build in rewards like a $500 book stipend. If you complete 15, you're on track. One of the things I love is that somebody's pursuing, it's a commuter campus, and they're saying if you get your 15 and you're on track, then you get preferred parking. It's a Rhodes Scholar. Other students that are on track can get preferred registration. If you're on track, then you get to go to the head of the line in terms of getting the classes you need and the times you need them. There are inexpensive ways to provide these kinds of encouragements. So time, the length of time it takes, we need to shorten that. We need to have students start right away, and we need to have them go more intensely if they're going to be discussing. And don't misunderstand me. I'm not talking about somebody getting a four-year degree in 3 years. I'm talking about them getting a four-year degree in 4 or 5 years rather than 6 or 7. The second, which is even more counterintuitive, is the issue of choice. And choice is as American as anything there is. We love choice. Houses, cars, bottles of ketchup. We like, if we went in and there was only one kind of ketchup, we wouldn't know what to do. But the truth is that choice, too much choice, is not good for our students. There was a famous study done on the psychology of choice. It's called the jam study. There were 2 tables of jam, one with 24 jars, one with 6 jars. Many, many more people stopped at the table of 24 jars, but 10 times as many bought at the table at 6, because they could kind of work that out. I don't like grape jelly, so I'm down to 5, and I can figure this out. They've done the same study on, some of you may have 401ks after the recession's over, but they've done studies there. The more choices that people have, the less likely they are to make choices at all, and when they do, they make poor choices. Study after study has confirmed that too much choice, especially uninformed choice, leads to poor choice. And we know on many college campuses, we have one counselor for 400 students, 500 students. We know they don't get advice. We know they choose classes by asking their friends, by reading a course title, by not wanting to go to class on Friday afternoon. And they make lots of mistakes. And they build up credits that don't transfer or don't help them get their degree. And just as a contrast, I went back to my alma mater, Purdue University, and looked at it online and looked at their history degree. And the history degree says, well, you take so many from the Common Core. And I thought, well, this is a good start. But then I realized the Common Core had 100 different courses in it. And then it said, we'll take so many from this grouping, so many from this grouping, so many from this grouping, and somehow this makes a degree. I was an engineering student at Purdue, and my course said, the first semester, you take these courses. You take English, physics, chemistry, the calculus class. The second semester, you take these courses. And then once you've chosen your engineering discipline, then you take these courses. And it was a semester pathway all the way to graduation. And that's what we need for every student. I'm told pre-med is a forced march to graduation. It's no surprising that nursing students have among the highest graduation rates. Not only is it harder to get in, but it's a very prescriptive curriculum. You can't say, oh, I'm going to skip the blood class. I mean, the nursing faculty said, if you're going to be a nurse, this is what you're going to take. And we say that honor students, many of them have a very prescriptive curriculum. So it works for students that are honor students, engineering students, med students, nursing students. It can work for many students and most students. Students should be given an academic map. I point to Arizona State as one of the best. It's on their website called eAdvisor. They give them a map. You want to be in biology, this is the semester by semester map. These are the milestone courses you need to take every semester to be on track. They've taken it a step farther. It's also forced them to narrow their curricula You still get electives, but it says this is the pathway. There aren't 8 ways to get a biology degree. There's this pathway with these electives. But what they've taken it a step further, which I would highly recommend, is that once you're on that path, that's your default pathway. That's your default choice. And you don't have to go to a counselor to stay on that path. You have to go to a counselor to get off the path. So rather than having, I say for every 1 student that explores the curriculum, there's 7 wandering through the curriculum. Rather than having them discover the right pathways, we need to put them on the right pathways, default choice, and have them go to counselors to get off. They also have what they call hard triggers. If you get more than 6 credit hours behind, it triggers a meeting with your counselor. If you get less than a C average in the semester, they think half those students will drop out. That triggers a visit to the counselor. So it's more than laying out a pathway. It's also saying this is the pathway. There's a book called Nudge I would encourage you to read that essentially paints this picture. It's called Choice Architecture. There's a lot of psychology behind what I'm talking about and a lot of social experiments. It's very powerful and very effective. We say students they make a big choice to go to college. They make a big choice to choose your college. You need to help them choose a program, career path. But having done that, the faculty really need to say, if you want to be a history major, this is the pathway. The last and final point I want to make, the hardest but maybe the most important in terms of what a completion plan should include, is what we call structure. And the simplest way to describe this is that we did a lot of work early on in Tennessee, and I had an opportunity to meet with the governor of Tennessee for lunch, and I had a few minutes with him to talk about Tennessee. And so I thought about this, and I prepared 1 sheet of paper and put it on the table between us, knowing that it would be, that governors have little time. So in Tennessee, about 20 years ago, their system diverged. It's not quite like the Georgia Technical College system, but even more so. They have technical colleges, 25 of them, they only do 1-year certificate programs. The community colleges, they don't do any 1-year certificate programs, they do 2-year programs. So if you want to be a 1-year nurse, you go to the tech centers. If you want to be a 2-year nurse, you go to community colleges. If you want to be 1-year certificate in computer science, you go to the tech centers. If you want 2, you go to the community college. 44 other states, those are all part of the community college system. So on this piece of paper, I put the graduation rates for the tech centers on one side and the community colleges on the other side. Community colleges have an average graduation of 14%. The tech centers have an average graduation rate of 70%. So the governor picks this up and he said, Stan, tell me about this. I did not know this about my tech centers. Why is this true? I said, well, there is some truth that if the career students may graduate at a higher rate, but that's really not the story. These students are as poor, as old, as the same number of minority students. The difference is the structure. They go to school 8:30 in the morning, Monday through Friday until 2:30 every day. It's a block schedule. They go in cohorts. They take attendance, I think an underrated strategy. Their courses are laid out for them. If you pick machine tool, you don't say, I want these 5 courses. This is the machine tool curriculum. If you pick computer science, there's branching. You want to be in networking. You want to be in software. There's branching. But having made those choices, those courses are laid out for you. And the curriculum is integrated. People say, well, Stan, that's in Tennessee, and it's a tech center. That's not like us. So, okay, go 1,000 miles away to New York City, to the CUNY system. They have a program called ASAP. It's on their website. Those students go in a block schedule. You come in and they say, Stan, do you want to go in the morning from 8 to 12 or in the afternoon from 1 to 5? Your courses the first semester are laid out for you. If you say, I want to be a liberal arts transfer student, they're laid out for you for the first year. They take attendance. They're more academic. 70% of those students intend to transfer to a 4-year college. They've doubled their graduation rate. The CUNY system has about a 25% graduation rate. They're now up to 55% for these students. It's the basis for the new community college that they're just launching in New York City that the mayor's really pushing. All these same principles that I talked to you about. Highly successful. So this structure is extremely important. And so in the do this, not that, do not do remediation the way we're doing it. Stop that. Do co-rec remediation. Embed remediation in content courses. Combine English and reading. If students are taking a history course, have the remedial English course supplement that history course so they write more and read more about history. There's a lot that we can do. Uri Treisman is going to talk to you about picking the right math. All these placement tests that we use are algebra placement tests. And all the remediation that we do is about getting them ready for college algebra. If you're a student in elementary education and not taking that college algebra, or a student in business and needs statistics, this whole system fails for you. You need to change that system and get students in the right mathematics, into statistics, into math reasoning. That has to change too. Time, students need to take 15 hours, not 12. They need to be more intensive. We need to have shorter time to graduation, and they need to start sooner. Choice, every student ought to have a map to graduation, and I'd love to see that map not only be an option for them, but to be, that's the map, and to get off the map, they have to go see an instructor. And finally, on structure, I would strongly encourage you to think about block scheduling, to think about starting students in cohorts, to think about taking attendance and using it, to think about the kinds of structures that these students need. And taken together, they can be highly effective. So in closing, I just have 3 thoughts for you. And this is important since you're putting these completion plans together. Number 1, think about this as we're not changing things at the margin. You get marginal returns. This is system redesign. This needs to be very different along the lines that I described. 2, it needs to be scale. You might want to start to phase something in, granted, but eventually it has to affect your whole college or you're not going to get the returns you need. And finally, it needs to be bold. Again, we are not going to get the kinds of returns. These students you saw up here today, there are so many students that could be like them but are not because they've dropped out along the way. And that's really the challenge we have. And the last point I want to make is we all go to conferences. And I say to people, do 3 things. Meet somebody you didn't meet before. Learn 3 things you didn't learn before. But most importantly is the next day when you go home, do something different as a result of what you've learned. Otherwise, we haven't accomplished that. And that's really your challenge, and I think the governor's challenge, is he expects, you expect, to dramatically change the way people go to school in Georgia so you can have these kinds of students in the hundreds of thousands of students across the state. Thank you for having me.
Good afternoon. I have the pleasure of introducing our next keynote speaker, and I won't take much time because I'd rather you hear from him than me. His bio is in your packet. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Uri Treisman, who's a professor of mathematics and of public affairs at the University of Texas at Austin. He's a national leader in STEM education and remediation. Thank you.
Thank you. So first, I just want to say, listening to those students, it reflects the humanity and the wisdom of the people who organized this conference. I'm a mathematician, so I understand the almost unnatural power of numbers. But as an educator, I know that if you cannot see the faces of your students in data or the faces of your students in numbers, those data are not actually going to help you improve. This is an important idea. One of the things about data, when you look at it, it's important to start by looking at the strengths of your system, because when you do large-scale change, and Stan has pointed out why large-scale change is necessary in the system, you have to be very careful not to do what often happens in large-scale change, which is, as the first thing, killing off all the things that produce your successes. So honoring, protecting, focusing on your successes is really important to the work. The second thing about focusing on strengths and remembering the faces of those students is to remember that when things get tough, and they will get tough, that they've been tough before, and that you've built durable structures that have produced those 20 students you spoke to. But you cannot let the successes and the examples that are hand-picked allow you to countenance complacency. We have to build similarly strong structures for the students who are now failing. And as Stan pointed out, when you look at the numbers, for too many students, for myriad students, remediation has been a burial ground for their aspirations. I won't repeat the numbers that Stan showed, but they're in your own data. We have large numbers of students who come to us, and the data show that 90% of them are absolutely positive that they're going to succeed when they start. It's not about their aspirations and their desires, but we have structures that are not serving them well. Now, we have a hard problem in front of us, and I'm a mathematician, so I think of Albert Einstein's wonderful comment that when you take on challenging issues, you should make everything as simple as possible, but not simpler. And when we take on the redesign of now the remedial pathways, and the way to do it is exactly as Stan has laid out, by co-requisite models and stretch models, the data is overwhelming that they're much more successful, is that there are several different dimensions we have to take on simultaneously. And when we look nationally, because almost everyone everywhere is now working on the same problems you are, we have the benefit of learning from each other. There are sort of 5 different dimensions that have to be tackled and coordinated. And the first one is the content of courses. Last year I interviewed 700 community college students and students in technical colleges. Wow, people who want to be firemen, policemen, EMTs, interior designers, taking algebra for the 5th time or more. 35,000 students in California repeating one of the remedial math courses for the 5th or larger numbers of times, while they turned away 144,000 students. A community college in Washington State that had no spaces this fall in remedial math because every single space was filled by students who had failed it the year before. And what are they taking? Factoring trinomials and rationalizing binomial surd denominators. In fact, labor market data shows that growing number of students actually need statistics. Think of how often you factor trinomials compared to how often you look at data. Not close. Right? More and more students in technical and degree programs, 2-year degree programs, need to know basic mathematics at a much deeper level than they know it now, and they need to know how to use it flexibly in unfamiliar contexts. It's time to redesign the content of these courses. People who know me know that I'm a fairly conservative person. I believe there should be an extremely high bar for change, but the fact is that that bar has been met by any standard. Every few decades, we need to sit back and ask hard questions about the evidentiary basis for our prerequisites and the courses we teach entering students. And the time is for the faculty in your system to do that. What is the evidence base for those requirements that are blocking people from their upward mobility? The second big area is structure. As Stan pointed out, in some institutions there are 5 developmental courses before you get to the regular college course, and 2/3 of the students who fail to complete remediation pass every course in the sequence. The sequences are so long, students are ready to retire when they complete the sequence. Right? We need to rethink that and allow students to take the real courses more intensively with better support. That's going to produce better success. The third is the delivery vehicles. We have diverse populations with complex lives. We need to think about how we offer our courses to them in hybrid forms, traditional forms, modularized forms, and so on. But focusing on the delivery is not a replacement for thinking about the content and structure. The art is to get the right student in the right course, in the right delivery vehicle at the right time. The fourth thing is student support. Student support, we have just finished interviews with 100 tutors in learning support centers. Overwhelmingly, they tell us they see students when it's too late. And I'm a math guy. If you're 2 weeks behind in a math course, you're not going to catch up by going to a tutor. The tutorial support was one of the most demoralized groups of people on campuses. We need to learn from the campuses that are recentering responsibility for student success in faculty roles, are reassigning tutors to work with faculty in their classrooms every day so that students don't feel stigmatized when they seek help, but the people designed to support them are there when they need them, in whatever format that requires. And then fifth, we need to think about new supports for faculty. Many of the faculty teaching these courses are contingent faculty, and it's the group on campus that we invest almost no resources in. If we expect whole-scale system change in courses that are mostly taught by contingent and adjunct faculty, we're going to have to think through respectful support systems for their individuals so they can learn new content and teach in new ways. Tomorrow we'll talk about what's being learned in other states and what other states I think can learn from you. But I want to leave you with one key idea, the bigger frame for this work. Americans, we as a people, have a preference for nostalgia over history. We love our democracy, but we believe it's here because of what the Founding Fathers did. Our democracy is here because people have believed that through hard work and education they can improve their lives. Americans aren't uncomfortable with inequality, but if they don't believe that by hard work and education they can better their lives and better their children's lives, that threatens the core function of democracy. And guess what? We, higher education, are the engine of upward mobility in our society. For the first time, the chances of moving up socially and economically in the US is lower than in many European countries and Canada. Right? We've lost the ability to advance through education and hard work. The work that Stan's talking about, the completion agenda that Governor Deal has made a central policy priority for the state, is more than just the nitty-gritty details of courses. It's about, do we live in an America in which hard work and education pays off and improves your lot in life? That's the task faculty and administrators are working on in the completion agenda. It's not about arguments about factoring versus data distributions. It's, do our programs allow people better lives and set up their children for better lives? Thank you.